Okay, so let's look now at minerals and materials that we get from the lithosphere. So some examples of some of the materials we get from the lithosphere include things like aggregates, so this is things like sand, gravel, and stones. And this is we get an enormous amount of this from the earth. So we get 40 billion tons per year. Okay. Um, Iron that we use for making things like steel, we get 1,700 or 1,700 million tons per year. Limestone that we use for things like making cement or creating lime for agriculture. 600 million tons per year. All the way down to something like platinum. Which we use for things like catalytic converters. We only managed to extract 220 tons per year. So not very much at all because it's much rarer. And the thing we have to remember with extracting minerals from the lithosphere is they are not evenly distributed. This means that we find valuable materials or minerals in specific locations. And we will look in more detail at the processes that places those materials in certain places. So let's have a look at some examples of resource uses. We are looking at things like using materials in the lithosphere for building. So building materials include things like gypsum for plaster, so plasterboard, for example. Concrete is made up of sand, lime, stones, so aggregates. Steel for making up the strong parts of our buildings is from iron. And things like glass. We use sand to make the glass. Energy uses include things like nuclear fuels, so things like uranium, and all the materials that make the power plant as well. We extract fossil fuels from the lithosphere. Batteries, so things like cobalt, manganese, lithium, these sorts of things are all really important for our battery storage, and obviously copper for moving that power around the place. Vehicles use titanium for things like space vehicles because it's strong and light, or jet engines or fuselages again because it's strong and light. Jet engines use a whole variety of like metals, so things like nickel. And our vehicles have in their catalytic converters We've got things like platinum and cerium, which are quite rare elements that we have to work quite hard to get hold of. In electronics, we have things like copper for wires, and we have our microprocessors like transistors. These are made out of things like silicon and indium. And for agriculture, we have sulfur, which is used for pest control and also for making fertilizers through its use of sulfuric acid and as an intermediate chemical. And we also get directly fertilizers. So things like phosphorus, potassium. All of these sort of things. And it's important to, when you realize the vast array of different materials that we get from the earth, that they are pretty much non-renewable. And the exploitation in many cases is unsustainable due to the damage it does directly to the planet and to the effect on the reserves that remain for future generation use. So that's important things to consider.